Robert, so from our discussions, I know that you mentioned that a career in insurance was probably not what you set out to do. Can you share with us a little bit about your journey and, your background and maybe from childhood and what led you here today?
Yeah, sure, Sarah. And thanks a million for having me here. Having me here this morning. Yeah, insurance was definitely not part of a big master plan. I grew up in Rathmines, not too far from here, just beyond Rathmines in Dartry. Had a very comfortable growing up or childhood. Mum and dad and my sister. Mum and dad would have made a lot of sacrifices for the two of us to make sure that we got the best of everything and had every opportunity in terms of education and sport. My dad worked in banking, Mum worked from home. But, to give us those opportunities, Mum would have kept students, all through the year and, would have made lasagnas and apple pies for the dropping well down the road. So there would have been quite a bit of, sacrifice made to make sure that myself and my sister Sue had the best of everything. Had a great time in school, really enjoyed my time in school in Ranelagh and Gonzaga. Made some great friends there who are still counted as great friends today. Went on to Trinity, ended up doing a business degree in Trinity. Didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do, to be honest, Sarah. I enjoyed my time there, probably a little bit too much.
As students should.
Yeah, quite definitely. Scraped through, nearly ended up changing course after second year, but ultimately decided to stick at it. Probably about the only thing that you'd say from my time in Trinity is I met my wife Ruth.
Okay, wow,
that's probably the biggest achievement that I had from my time there. Went travelling for a little bit, came back, did a master's degree out in UCD in marketing. Really enjoyed that year. And then I didn't really know what it was. I still didn't really know, even though I was 23, didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do. And took a job working for Caterhire, driving a van, delivering tables and chairs, which was a brilliant job, really enjoyed it. But I suppose my parents, in fairness to them, having sacrificed so much for myself and my sister, that definitely, they weren't really on board with the notion of me doing that job. So there was probably a bit of pressure from them to try and come up with a plan. And initially I definitely wanted to work for myself. So I was looking at trying to do something maybe in hospitality, bars, restaurants, nightclubs. That didn't really come to pass. And one night after a game of tennis with someone, they kind of, asked me what I was up to and kind of talked that through with them. And they're like, oh, maybe would you consider a job in insurance? And I'd sworn that I would never take a job in an office. That was the one commitment I kind of made to myself. Yeah, I'm never going to work in an office.
What was it about that? It was like no to an office.
Just being probably tied to a desk and having probably been in a house where, living with my parents, seeing my dad go off to work every day and working in an office and working really hard. And probably being aware of maybe some of the politics that might go with that as well. Just didn't really feel like it was for me. I think the job that I was offered in Aon, where I ultimately ended up moving to, was being paying about €1,000 more, and I was kind of
than driving the van.
How bad can it be? So before I knew it, 2 weeks later, I was sitting behind a desk in Aon, and then during my initial time in Aon, probably didn't take it too seriously. Certainly for the first 12 months, probably lucky that Aon kept me on, I would nearly say, based on certain things, probably enjoying the finer things in life on Wednesday nights and Thursday nights, and then coming in, probably not performing at my best, certainly on Fridays. But ultimately was given a project to work on, which was to try and develop a new business strategy, professional indemnity insurance. And once I got stuck into that, kind of things started to click. And I think that's what I really needed, was an actual focus. So, that was at times pretty mundane project, but there was like a prize at the end of it, that if I delivered on a certain number, there would be something in it for me. And that was the motivation of the goal that I needed. But I mean, it was getting the 01 through 09 telephone directories or golden pages, as it were, and transcribing every architect, engineer, solicitor, accountant into Excel, then working with the IT team, Brian Lynch and John Halloran, to come up with an access database, then writing out to all of the people, cold calling them, getting renewal dates, and then trying to win business then after that. So that's how it all started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you say there's always been an ambition? Like, are you an innately ambitious person?
I'd say probably more competitive than ambitious in that, if I'm playing a board game with the kids, or, out playing a game of golf, a game of tennis, going for a cycle. I want to be the first up the hill. Yeah, I am ambitious, but there's never been a master plan. It's never been the case that I always wanted to be something. I probably wanted to work for myself. That probably would have been an ambition that I had. And when I started out in Aon, I remember being at the Insurance Institute dinner in Dublin, probably about 2 or 3 years into the journey, and sitting beside Breda Farrell, who, would have been one of the senior leaders in the business. And she asked me what was my ambition at that stage. And I kind of blurted out that I wanted to be a director in the business because it felt like the right thing to say at the time. Then I achieved that. And then when I became a director in the business, like, right, what's the next goal? And that was probably to be MD. Probably realized that wasn't going to happen for me in Aon. So, took a slightly different path going on to the insurer side, working in, or say in Aviva. But I think where I am now in Howden is probably a great halfway house between working for yourself and the warm embrace, or sometimes cold embrace, of working for a large corporate where, it's a business that's owned by the people that work there. So of the 16,000 people working in Howden, 4,500 people are shareholders in the business. So it's kind of suits me perfectly in terms of where I've always wanted to be.
Yeah, it's unique.
Very unique. Yeah, it's the 5th largest employee-owned business in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a nice blend of being creative, autonomous, making decisions, that freedom that I think sometimes people seek with owning their own business, but it's not necessarily freedom when you put in the hours, that comes with it.
No, it's a great responsibility, and obviously you've got a great responsibility to all the people who work in the business as well. But I think myself and Mark Nolan, who started with me at the same time as CFO, were very, very fortunate initially to work with Aston Lark and Peter Blanc and Stuart Rootham, who gave us that freedom or that latitude to build a business as we saw fit in Ireland. And then more laterally with Carl Shuker and Andy Galbraith and even David Howden himself, we have that autonomy here to do that, which mightn't necessarily be the case in other businesses.
Yeah, that's great. And, when you told me that you took on the CEO role at the start of COVID, I think anybody taking that challenge on, it's like, oh, okay, what do I do here? And whether it's funny or not, but starting in your daughter's bedroom, I just I hope, you're kicking her out and you're starting in there. I can imagine that, that came with its own challenges. And what sort of pressures did that bring to you when you're taking on this opportunity? You're now the CEO of this multi-million and you're in your daughter's bedroom.
That was very strange.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Surrounded by Harry Potter Lego and pink walls. It was, it wasn't certainly what I'd probably planned. I'd agreed to take the job kind of June, July 2019, but the actual starting date was the 12th of March 2020. So literally the day Leo Varadkar stood on the steps of the observatory in Washington and announced that all the schools were closing. And we were myself and Mark started on the same day, and we were in with the Robertson O management team introducing ourselves, and Andy Lowe's, the founder of the business, had stepped out, and he came rushing into the office at 9:30 with his phone. You won't believe what's just happened. And yeah, it was literally, oh my God, are we back in 2008 all over again? No one really knew where we were. And we went down to Wexford the next day, myself and Mark, to introduce ourselves to the team. And there would be 50, 55 people in the office on a normal day. There was maybe 12 people there because, people needed to mind their kids themselves rather than relying on a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or whoever or a creche who might have minded the kids ordinarily, or they would have been in school, obviously. So I think what was expected of us in terms of delivering the job was completely different than what we had initially signed up to do. The first 6 months was very much, right, batten down the hatches and let's keep the show on the road here. We were very fortunate, though, that the two businesses that Aston Lark had acquired in Robertson Loan Rights were great businesses in their own right, with really experienced people. You'll know many of them, Sarah. Mark Whelan, Mark Boland, Denise Bean, Damien Foran, Andrew Murphy, Brian Pearson, Amy O'Dwyer, who leads our people team. And we really inherited two great businesses. But it was very much about keeping the show on the road initially. I think sort of slightly strangely, COVID kind of suited myself and Ruth and the kids. I know that isn't necessarily the experience that everybody had, but I think my expectation probably taking the job was that I'd be, working 60 or 70 hours in an office, traveling quite a bit, maybe over and back to the UK a couple of times a month. And instead, I had dinner every night at 6:00 with the family and went back online later on. So probably got to see more of them than I would have in my previous job in Aviva, where there would have been a lot of disruption to weekends with corporate entertainment, etc. So yeah, it was challenging, no different to how taking on any new role is challenging, but equally it kind of worked for us. Yeah.
And what do you find is the most challenging part of your role now that it's evolved, and what is the most satisfying part as well?
Well, I guess challenging is that you just don't know what's next. You know, I could walk down the stairs here out on the street and the phone could ring. It could be anything. Yeah, but that's also probably the part that you enjoy, the variety. In that no 2 days are the same. Yeah, like I said already, we've been very, very lucky in terms of the people that we work with every day, be that here or the UK or further afield within Howden. And I think we're very fortunate to work in a great industry. You know, the insurance industry is a fantastic place to work. The bit that, and that's probably the bit that I enjoy is, you know, it's getting out and about and meeting people either in our business or in insurers, in life offices, you know, trying to convince new talent to join us, working on the M&A. So, you know, talking to like-minded brokers, seeing if they might be interested in partnering with us. That's the bit that I find exciting and energizing. It's certainly not being chained to a desk or sitting at a board meeting.
I get that. It's like creativity again, and the amount of diversity in your role, and ultimately being part of its success. Throughout your career, you've pushed yourself. You joined Aon, and you had a goal to be a director before you're 30, which you achieved. And this is my favourite one. You joined another company to manage a team of 70 people with no people management experience. That one was,
virtually no people management experience.
That one was a big one. And from there then to being the CEO of a multi-million, 300 plus at the time, it's now larger headcount.
Yeah.
Any normal person would feel fear or doubt, or, you know, I guess conflict sometimes in making these decisions, you know, whether you have the experience. What was that experience like for you, and how did you ultimately push through it?
Well, I definitely have all those doubts. You know, I doubt myself every day. But I think everybody doubts themselves, right? You know, that's not unusual. I think probably go back to what's the reason that I'm doing it, and that's probably what drives me on. And you know, I think about the opportunities that my parents were able to give to me, and the opportunities that myself and Ruth would like to be able to give to our kids. So I feel kind of duty bound to keep pushing myself forward to make sure that I can do that. But, you know, in terms of those opportunities, it's also about being present for them as well. You know, coaching Richie's soccer team, being at the side of court maybe when they're playing a tennis match. Ideally trying to be a role model for them, you know, in terms of what they see you do or what they see Ruth do. And that's really what drives me on. But there's loads of doubts, Sarah. Every day. Yeah.
And I think a part of it is just embracing them, you know, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I think sometimes, especially in the industry that I'm in with recruitment, is that fear can be crippling. And sometimes when people go for a new role or a new job, or, you know, the lack of belief that they can achieve this sometimes can mean a poor interview, or, you know, it can be something that gets in their way.
I think that's a really good point, because I think the scariest moment for me in my career was when I left Aon. Because it was where I'd grown up. Yeah, to go into another business that had a different culture and a different way of doing things, that was a really scary moment. But then having done it once, I think you kind of realize that, you know what, I can probably do that again.
It's just making that first step, taking that first risk.
Yeah. And that's probably the same for everything in anything in life.
And do you think leadership is for everybody?
I think it probably depends on how you define leadership, to be honest, Sarah. For me, leadership isn't about doing the job that I'm doing today, or, you know, or David Howden's job. It's probably an attitude. So it's being prepared to take personal responsibility for the things that you see. So I don't know, example in our business might be, if someone sees something wrong in terms of the documentation that might be going out to customers, instead of, you know, telling me about it 2 or 3 months later, why not go and talk to operations and get it fixed straight away? Or if I think myself, you know, from walking into the office and I see that there's rubbish on the pavement outside, rather than just walking by and walking straight in, why not pick it up and put it in the bin, right? And I think everybody is capable of that leadership. That doesn't extend to their working career. It extends to their own personal being as well. So I definitely think leadership is for everyone, and I think it's everyone's duty to take personal responsibility. And probably what I feel most passionate about is the responsibility that people have to make sure that the younger people in our business today and the younger people in our industry are afforded the same opportunities that I would have been afforded. It's a very different working environment to the environment that I grew up in. You know, I'm 20 years working in the industry this month, and things have evolved incredibly where, you know, you would have spent 9 to 5, 40 hours a week in the office to now we have people in our business who mightn't even come to the office once a month. So I think it's really, really hard if you're working from home, particularly if you're starting out in your career, to learn. And I think that's really important. But I think senior people in the business and those people with more experience have a duty to pass on the knowledge and help those people up the curve where they mightn't be necessarily spending 40 hours. I think, you know, if you're in the office, you're going to learn faster than at home. Equally, and this isn't the forum to get into a debate for the merits or demerits of CP 116, but there aren't as many events now that there would have been historically in the industry to build your own network, to build your own personal brand. And I think that's a really important thing for people to do. So, you know, if I was to encourage anybody in the industry to do anything, it would be to get involved in things that are happening outside your own company. Yeah,
that's a fresh perspective on leadership as well. You know, it's looking inward, not necessarily just about your career. It's just as a general presentation of yourself.
Sure.
You know, to the world. I think as well, insurance now is a choice where, you know, like you got into insurance off the back of a game of tennis or, you know, somebody's father or cousin or uncle. You know, historically people end up in insurance. And I think now it's a choice. You know, you can do a degree and, you know, it can be a really attractive career for people from a development and a financial perspective. I guess when you were building or still developing, you're still very young, developing your career.
Not that young.
Has there been sacrifices for you along the way? And do you think sacrifices are inevitable when you're striving for, you know, something big?
I think if you look at anything in life, yes, there's sacrifices that you have to make if you want to achieve anything. I suppose if I look at myself, you know, there's 3 probably, you know, very important parts of my life. That's, you know, work, family, and then friends. And work has definitely been a big priority over the last 4 years since I took this role on 4 and a bit years ago. I haven't sacrificed anything in relation to the family. You know, like I spoke about already, just in terms of COVID, probably got to spend more time nearly with the family. And that's a huge priority for me. Probably the thing that has suffered really has been friends. I haven't spent anything like as much time with my friends as I would ideally like, but something had to give. You know, if you're working, you know, 60 or 70 hours a week and your kids play 20 hours of sport each a week, there's not much time left for nights out or trips away that I would have gone on maybe historically. I'm very fortunate though that, you know, the friends I have are people I've been friendly with from the age of 5, 6, 7. So, you know, I know that when the occasion does arise, like when we went to the World Cup in France last October, you just pick it back up like, you know, you've seen them. But that's definitely something that I need to prioritize again at some point in the future when the time allows it.
Yeah, I think when I was, spending time investing in my career, you know, the person that worked the longest, that worked the hardest was typically the blueprint for, you know, building your career. And I think that has changed. As you say, you know, what you've experienced is you can have a busy career, but also you can have family time. And I think COVID has been fortunate in that respect to show us that, you know, you can have more than just one or the other.
Yep.
What does work-life balance mean to you? And do you think that it's possible to build, I guess, a big career between the hours of 9 to 5 and clock off at 5 and you're done?
I think it's really hard. Yeah, I think it's really, really hard when you're certainly when you're trying to establish yourself. I think it's really, really challenging. Post-COVID, you know, I'd never been on a video call before COVID, or if I had, you know, it would have been an internal call maybe in Aviva on a Cisco screen where we would have been talking to colleagues in our Cork office as opposed to with customers. Whereas now, if I take yesterday afternoon, Ruth was working yesterday afternoon, so I needed to step in and get involved in the kids. But I did all my calls on my mobile while ferrying kids here, there, and everywhere. I wasn't any less productive.
Yeah.
That had my full attention, but I also had, at different points, 2 or 3 kids in the car, moving from one sporting event to the next, and that wouldn't have been possible pre-COVID. And I would have prioritized the work. I would have had to prioritize the work because I would have had to been present in the office. So that's definitely a big change. So I think work-life balance is easier. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're establishing yourself at the start of your career, you do need to be present as well. You can't, this is something that we're kind of wrestling with inside in Howden at the moment, is if someone is working from home 5 days a week, can they be promoted and look after and manage a team? I think that's going to be really, really hard. Yeah, that's something that we're debating vigorously, yeah.
And I don't know if we necessarily have a blueprint for that yet either.
No, I don't think so.
Because a lot of companies don't have the experience of actually implementing this and seeing success or failure.
Yeah.
So it's changing, but I love that, listening to you talk about running your company and simultaneously dropping your kids to their sporting events. Like that's actually,
well, I'm sure you can
probably relate.
You can probably relate to that though,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah. I'm trying to explain to my 2-year-old, you still have my attention, but I also need to just have this phone call. She's a little young to comprehend, but
2 is difficult. 14, 12 and 9 is slightly easier. Yeah.
I think 2 is like, she's like, no phone call. Your attention's mine. Yeah. But it is liberating. And I agree with you. I feel anything is possible as a result. Back to the industry, the insurance industry, and I guess, buying brokers and the changing landscape of the industry is every week. It's slowed down somewhat now, but I think for the last couple of years, I think I lost track with companies that were being acquired. How competitive is it out there?
Well, I think when we started on this journey 4.5 odd years ago, there were, by our estimation, in the general insurance side, about 125 brokers that were turning over 500 grand or more. So that's maybe 5 or 6 staff. I would say half those brokers have now been acquired or partnered with someone like ourselves. There's still, a role for the independent broker in this market. Definitely. No different to what you've seen in other markets that have been consolidated, be it the US or the UK. I think for those independent brokers, you need to have a real strong reason, to exist. You need a unique geographic advantage. You need to be in some sort of a niche that nobody else is in already. Within that geography as well, you want to be fully embedded in the community and sponsoring all the local, be it sport or cultural activities. And nobody would dare but place their insurance or, be a customer of yours. I think where we're going is probably, 10 large brokers or thereabouts in the market, with a handful of diehard independents then on top of that. And one of the things that you get asked frequently is, is that good for the customer? And if I think about our customers, if you're a customer of Howden today, you can now get access to financial advice, you can get access to mortgage advice, you have a much broader product set than you would have previously, a stronger claims proposition, risk management advice as well. So that's really positive for customers as I see it. And equally, as one of those stronger brokers, we've greater leverage with our supplier as well in terms of life offices and, general insurers as well. So I think that's really, really strong. Look, competition is hugely fierce, Sarah. That's not going to stop. We're in the trenches every day, no different to any other broker. Duking it out. That's the way of the industry. The competition to acquire other brokers, because of the way we set out our stall from the start, we've taken a slightly different tack from other people. Okay. Yes, there were 125 brokers, but we evaluated everyone based on a cultural alignment with our business. So did they care for the customers? Did they care for the people that were working there? Did they have a good relationship with insurers? And if the answer was yes to those, and I probably liked dealing with them for my time, and be it Aviva or RSA, then we were interested in having conversations. So there were only ever 35 or 40 brokers on a list that we wanted to have a conversation with. And we haven't deviated from that list, and nor will we.
Okay.
And The main reason being is that when someone comes on board with ourselves, it's going to involve an element of change. So, be that systems, potentially location, a way of working. So change is hard, really hard. And ideally, you want to be doing it with like-minded people.
Yeah, that's fair. 35, 40 is still a fair chunk of, it's an ambitious chunk of the 125. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And I guess looking at those that are, entering into the industry or building their career or middle management, people wanting to improve their situation, and what sort of advice do you have for that person?
I think put your hand up and, ask what more can you do? Build your network, like I said already, in the industry. Get involved. Build your personal brand outside of the business that you're working in rather. Get known, put your hand up, and then if you do get given a project to work on, see it through to the end.
Yeah, great.
Make a success of it.
Yeah, okay, that's good advice. And what's next for you, and what's next for Howden?
Well, the ambition for the business was always to be in every major town around Ireland, and whilst we're on our way, there are some gaps, and we'd love to fill in those gaps. So we'll definitely, the M&A will continue. We'll look to attract new talent into the business, particularly in niches that we mightn't be in. We've very fortunately, since becoming part of Howden, we've got a lot of investment into the Irish business. So we've been able to bring in some really senior people into the company in key positions. So probably personally spending less time involved in the trading side of the business, but very fortunate to have the likes of Aidan Sheehy leading our commercial business, and Gemma Keaveney leading our personalised business. We're about to appoint a life and pensions MD. Ken Murray leads our mortgage business. Michael Skelton joined us to manage all of our insurer relationships. Okay. So my plan is not to get in the way of people who know way more about it. Shay Fox on the operations side as well. So I think we'll continue to grow. We've 433 people in the business today. That could be 750 by 26, 27. We want to be that full service broker. So if a customer calls into any of our branches, they can get the insurance advice or get the financial advice or mortgage advice that they need. It doesn't necessarily need to be the expertise doesn't necessarily need to reside in that office, but somewhere within Ireland or indeed the broader Howden group. So, local people looking after local customers, but with that global reach of Howden. So there's a long road left to run in our plans for Howden Ireland and what it is that we're trying to achieve. But that's no different to Howden globally. It's definitely as they see it, the challenger broker trying to take on the likes of Willis AM, Marsh and Gallagher. Yeah, okay. So to wrap up our interview, we always ask 3 fun questions. Sure. So if you were stuck on a desert island, what 3 items would you bring and why? Yeah, I had you did send me that question in advance, Sarah, so a good think about that. So I do like reading, so I think I'd definitely have to take a Kindle. Even though I don't own a Kindle today, I'd have to take a Kindle because there'll be plenty of variety. Something to listen to music on, and a kettle because I'd have to have tea. Yeah. Boiling seawater. I'd definitely have to have tea. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. And what was the last book that you read or podcast that you listened to? I am reading 2 books at the moment. One is called Net Gains, which is about data analytics in football. Right? I thought you were going to say the gym. No. Not those type of games. Should be going to the gym more, but no. And I'm reading 2 books. I'm also reading a John Connolly kind of thriller novel. Yeah, okay. He releases a book every year. It's like a guilty pleasure. Oh, really? Or whatever. Okay. Yeah, detective series that I read. So I'm reading the 2 of those at the moment. I do listen to quite a few podcasts, mostly current affairs and economics. So I know Dave McWilliams, Stand, Inside Politics, The Other Hand, that sort of stuff. Yeah, yeah. And 3 guests that you would invite to your dinner party? I'm going to be, I don't know, maybe boring is the wrong thing to say, but I just Ruth and the kids or 3 close friends. Yeah. Well, you don't see enough of your friends, so there you go. We'll accept that one. Yeah. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. No, it's great to chat to you. Thanks very much, Sarah.